On behalf of the centers, first of all, I'd like to welcome everybody. Today's webinar is entitled Historic Trauma and its Relation to COVID. This series is supported by a contract awarded by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Department of Health and Human Services or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. With that, I'd like to move to the next slide. And I have the great honor and privilege to introduce one of the presenters, Joseph Ray, from the United Nursing Homes and Tribal Excellence, known as Unite. He is the president of Unite. Joseph is the president, an elder care advocate, and a former board member of the Laguna Rainbow Coalition Corporation in Laguna, New Mexico. So with that, Joseph, do you want to go ahead and take over? I'll throw it to you.
Kwatse hopa. I hope you all can hear me well. My clans are Child of an Eagle and Big Corn, Yami Hanu, Yaku Hanu. I'm speaking to you today from Laguna Rainbow Center and in Casablanca, New Mexico. And I just wanted to welcome everyone today to our historical trauma and its relation to COVID webinar. Next slide, please. Reflecting on this resurfacing of historical trauma in elders due to similar feelings of isolation and depression experienced during COVID-19. Again, our people, tribal people, have had over 500 years in the change of our way of life, loss of culture, loss of our languages at times, in many cases, and it's led to certain behaviors amongst us, such as the distrust of government and the vaccines that were introduced to us, faulty equipment, smallpox infected blankets, the Indian Removal Act of 1830, and then which led to the creation of boarding schools in the 1870s and General Pratt's famous words of kill the Indian and save the man. There again is that distrust of government, and it at times during this COVID these COVID days, it's again led to certain behaviors. One of the main sticking points or sore points again is that isolation that it's created for our people, for our elders having to not be able to visit and leave the nursing homes, isolation from their family members during the pandemic. Again, with over 500 years of life change, it again has led to that historic trauma. Next slide, please. Our objectives for today, I have to zoom into my the words here. So we're going to highlight the importance of giving elders a voice as they deal with feelings of helplessness and isolation. We're going to discuss Native American ways of fostering community engagement and togetherness. And then third, we've adopted a consistent approach to building trust. Next slide, please. Oh, and now I'm going to turn it over now to our Vice President, Miss Ina, from Morningstar in Wyoming. Ina.
Hello, welcome everyone that's joining us today. My name is Ina Weed, and I am the Unite Vice President, and I am coming from Wind River Indian Reservation in Wyoming. I am a human resource manager with Morningstar Care Center here, and plus I'm an Eden alternative educator. And I'm very honored to be doing this presentation with our fellow Unite members here. So I am going to go ahead and hand it off to our next presenter to introduce herself, Ms. Brandy.
Hello, my name is Brandy Hodges. I am the administrator here at the White River Health Care Center. I'm in South Dakota. We are a tribally owned facility through the Rosebud Sioux tribe. I've been an administrator here for 6 years, since 2017, and I've been in healthcare for about 26 years now. I've worked in many of the other positions, and I thank you for letting us present today. I'll pass it on to Tiffany.
Hello, everybody. Welcome for joining us. I'm Tiffany Shangru. I'm the administrator at the Oglala Sioux Nursing Home. I'm also a board member of Unite. I am a member of the Oglala Sioux tribe, born and raised on the reservation. I've been working at the nursing home since it first opened in 2016. When I first started as the business office manager, we have six residents. We are a 60-bed long-term care nursing home with a 12-bed memory care unit that was built as an additional wing and opened in July of 2020. We currently have 32 in our long-term care and 6 in our memory care. I'll pass it on to Melissa.
Hello, my name is Melissa Martinez. I'm the executive director for Laguna Rainbow Corporation. We have a 58-bed tribal nursing home facility, and we also have a senior center for our community members. I have been part of the Laguna Rainbow Corporation in the Pueblo of Laguna since 2018. I've served as a director of nursing, a board member, and then also now as executive director. And I am also a Unite board member. And I would like to hand this back over.
My grandfather was a resident of the Albuquerque Indian School, and he used to tell me about the days when the authorities or the schoolmaster would come find him at the home here in Casablanca, in Parahi, Casablanca area, on the Pueblo of Laguna reservation, and it would be a time of sadness, taking my grandfather to the school in Albuquerque, which is located 50 miles as the crow flies. And again, he would always relate how he would run away, but how the authority, and then also how the authorities would always come back to get him. And for many families, they were threatened with jailing of the parents, and that is an extreme and has resulted in, again, a lack of trust of government and authorities. Times have changed where the tribes now have taken over the administration of the schools. My niece goes to school in Santa Fe, New Mexico, at the Santa Fe Indian School, and they pride themselves on having a diverse, and a robust program for academics. And again, as I said, times have changed to where that we do trust this school, because it's being run by our tribes here in New Mexico, as other Indian schools are being administered to this day. But again, due to that, the terrible history of when the boarding schools were first begun in the 1870s, and again, General Pratt's dictates of the method of assimilating, our tribal people into the dominant society. It just has led to so many sad times with the families with the people, because we as tribal people, we pride ourselves on who we are, our unique characteristics, our unique methods of living. We so many tribes have are gone and have been lost. But again, the tribes here in New Mexico, which there are 22 of, we pride ourselves on continuing those ceremonies and holding on to our history. But again, because we at one time were considered wards of the government, it has led to a lot of mistrust, a lot of feelings of depression and sadness. So I'll turn it over to the team now, so you can go on to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Hello, this is Brandy. So we had specific mental health impacts faced by trauma survivors now in nursing homes. Did a lot of mental health when, especially with COVID in our facility, we were able to make sure that our residents got a lot of outside air. We were also able to make sure that we spent extra time with our residents that were in isolation to keep them from the depression. Also recognized and made sure that we did traditional activities with them. Doing the outside, we had spiritual leader come in, and once a week they would go around our facility and make sure that they blessed the facility, and we did a lot of that. I'm going to pass it on to somebody else.
Okay, so just a little bit of background to kind of add with some of the impacts on trauma that older Native Americans kind of face. So I am also a nursing home administrator, and I worked during the pandemic in both a non-tribal nursing home in Albuquerque, New Mexico, as well as now out in the Pueblo of Laguna, which is the tribal nursing home. And so we could all agree that all of our residents across the nation really were affected with the isolation, just different loss of, some of this, the basic human touch, visits from family. For the nursing home out in Laguna, the tribes were hit really hard with some of the death and just the devastation. And so part of the historical trauma also, I kind of want to correlate to that, is historical losses of people and loss of the population, the land and the culture, food. And so some of the different things that we saw impacted to Native Americans is we're very out there, we're very culture food-based, and very, we come together, the families, multi-generational living. And so a lot of the times the homes were impacted heavily because of the intergenerational living. And so it impacted the grandparents, the children, and they were used to those visits all the time, the touch, the grandchildren. And part of our restrictions through our tribe was, everybody had the visitations restrictions, but we had a lot more strict visitation guidelines in the pandemic because people weren't allowed on the reservation unless they lived there or they were there just for work. And so some of the people weren't able to even do window visits at one point because they weren't able to make it onto the reservations because they were closed because of all the devastation from people getting COVID, dying. There's a lot of the comorbidities. Some of that loss of food has caused an increase in stuff like diabetes in Native Americans. And so we do see that a lot. And so we also had that. Another thing, there's a lot of traditional doings, and we have what you call like feasts out there where the whole community comes together. There's a lot of dances that come together and cultural aspects, and those were shut down more until kind of this last year. People kind of started coming out of, we call it hibernation, a lot of those were closed and people were used to going out into the community. We would host cultural meals like deer dinners and stuff. And so we weren't able to host those anymore. And so when we host stuff like that, we actually invite the whole community, not just the family members. It brought on a lot of isolation and depression because, they weren't able to go out into the community and practice some of those traditional and cultural things that they were able to. And so a little later, I'll talk about some of the stuff that we did do to help offset some of that, but I'll give the opportunity for some others to kind of illustrate what they experienced.
This is Tiffany again. We locked down our facility in March of 2020, but we didn't get COVID in our building until September. We then had to direct our residents to stay in their rooms. There were behaviors, of course, with some of our residents. It was hard for some of them some didn't mind, they would stay in their room. They're, kind of used to doing their own thing, but some of them that were really wanted to be around others. It was, we had to find ways to direct them back to their room. We ordered tablets and had cell phones that we could take to their room for phone calls, FaceTime, to communicate with their family. They had radios in their room so they could play our local radio station, Keeley 90.1 FM. Every morning they play Lakota music on the radio. We had all hallway activities. We also, did the window visits with families where they could come to the window, and we had a daughter that she would come and bring Subway, and she, give her mom sandwich and her drink, and we'd take it to her room and set her up by the window, and then her daughter would go sit outside and would open the window, and she'd sit there and visit with her mom and eat her sandwich and her drink with her. And there were several other families who would do the same. And there was some that didn't have anybody to come visit them. So those are the ones that we really had to work with and, pay attention, those are the ones that probably felt the most isolated. We have a few that still today do not want to come out of their room. We encourage them, daily to come out and eat breakfast, communal dining, eat with others, join activities. A couple of them like their cigarettes, they'll come out and smoke their cigarettes. But they go back to their room. So we just do the best we can by trying to get them, to join in with the community. I'll pass to the next one.
This is Brandy again. We've had a few of our residents that have continued to stay in isolation and haven't come out to, like Tiffany was saying, eat their meals, to come to activities, to be part of the nursing home social society that we have here. We also have some that would prefer not to meet with family at times, and do not want to do where the touch and the feel with some of their family members. When we first went into isolation, a lot of the residents were really scared. They were really worried of getting it because of what they were watching on the news. So when we first started opening up, we were going to do a Easter egg hunt for residents outside. And we figured it was going to be a good experience for them to actually be able to see the kids again. The residents were scared and did not want to have the kids come up. We also had a really hard time opening up, like during our holidays, or having people come back into the facility because they were scared of the existing having COVID. We did get COVID in our facility. The first time it took over about a year and a half before we did have it. And we only had, I think it was 7 residents that got it. We then got it a little bit more this past October, them all having their vaccinations, and the cases weren't as bad as they thought they were going to be. And the residents were more open to have people come back into our facility again and to have a normal life like we had in the existing. So those were some of our specific cases that we had to deal with in mental health. I think after the first year was a little bit easier, doing the second year and this third year was a lot harder for residents. They wanted to have people start coming back up. And then when we first started opening up and doing our family visits, it was really hard for us to keep with the guidelines that they came about in the very beginning. They weren't able to touch. They weren't able to be a foot away from each other. We had to do the social distancing. And that was probably one of the hardest parts. And then to have everybody walk around with masks, having our residents wear masks, having their families wear masks, and not being able to see those faces and not being able to see the expressions was one of the hardest things and not being able to, in the beginning, we weren't able to bring children into the facility. Now that we are being able to bring some of the children back into the facility, it's some of the residents are real weary about having that in the facility today because they like seeing the kids, but they don't want to get too close to them. So, and I don't know if anybody else has anything else they would like to add to this, but those are what we specifically saw in our facility here.
This is Tiffany again. I would just like to say that, you know, the Oglala Sioux tribe, our reservation is one of the largest forests in the United States. And on our reservation, over 50% of our children are raised by their grandparents. And it can be a blessing whenever they have no parents to take care of them. But there is also the grandparents that are, many of them are financially and emotionally abused by the grandchildren. So during COVID, it was really hard because our grandparents always feel like they have to take care of their grandchildren in one way or another, regardless of their age. So we had to, during the first year, for several months, we had to hire security to keep people from coming to the door to see their grandparents to get money. We had to talk to the grandparents and try to allow us to give them the money. And some of the grandparents had a hard time with that. They wanted to go out and they wanted to talk to them, touch them. But you know, we had to protect them from COVID. It was that first year was so scary. Nobody knew. That was before the vaccination came out. So it was a tough deal. Just, you know, it was like 8 months, I believe, that we had to have security to watch the doorway, and I'm just glad that it's over.
Hi, so this is Ina. So this slide is giving elders a voice. And so in here, want to talk a little bit about the importance of listening to elders' experiences and feelings during this time, but then ways to facilitate this communication and provide emotional support also. So here at Morningstar Care Center, you have to, and what we try to educate on as well is to being able to give that time, that one-on-one, because not only in this time that they spent over the 3 years of going through COVID is feeling that helplessness and maybe retriggering some of those traumas that historically they went through. And again, COVID put them right back to feeling that way. So, you know, that isolation, that withdrawal of activities, that closeness, that togetherness, the events, the social events, that having even animals. I'll give you one story of an animal. So here at Morningstar, we had a dog that the elder residents kind of brought in, and it was a dog that kind of wandered, but with our elders outside, they would always see it. So eventually they adopted it. So, but when COVID came, with all the restrictions, guidelines, all the rules, we couldn't have pets in the building, and that's huge of any home, huge. And so we found her a good home to go to. And so just like that, like losing that part of that companionship that a pet brings, and listening to the elders explaining of that loss, but again, having that helplessness right back there, and for them to face it, and them feeling already isolated and to feel like they have to do it alone. So, and what we teach here is having the opportunity to give as well to receive. And so that part is education, eat an alternative is an antidote that we help with. And so hopefully all our care partners, when they're doing the one-on-ones with them, they're able to help our elder residents cope with that helplessness feeling. Because somewhere we have to be able to gain that trust back with them, and then listen to their stories to see and understand where they're coming from, to give that hope back to them. And so they're not having those feelings again. And it's not like something that's going to be overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. So it's going to take some time, and that's that taking time to care with them. In this way, with the communication part also, we do have elder councils where it's just the elder residents in a meeting together, and they bring up different issues or concerns. We as managers, our care partners, go in and we help with those as well, for the communication part. And I think a huge emotional support that we weren't able to do in the beginning years that where COVID came about was that touch and the hugging and being able to show that everything was going to be okay. We were all distanced. And again, masks were brought up, so that expression of being able to show that was all taken away. So even us as care partners, we were put against barriers to help with that. So I feel like all of us had to do a constant like re-education, relearning through this whole process in order for us to help with that, with our elder residents. And I'll go ahead and pass it on if anyone else has something they want to share.
This is Brandy from White River Health Care Center. We did a lot of communication to our staff at that time and our education with them to make sure that they were going to give their full attention to residents to help, because we constantly reminded staff that they weren't able to see anybody else, that even our providers weren't coming in. They were seeing our behavioral health through a video. So it's like we made sure that they spent extra time with the residents and put their full attention on our residents here to help them cope with the first year. I think the first year we were in isolation a lot more than it was in the second and the third year, where they started kind of opening up and letting us have more contact and letting us have family visits. We also did the window visits, and with the window visits, we made sure that the family was there and there was a way to communicate back and forth to residents. So those were some of the ways that we were able to help with the communication. Thank you.
So this is Melissa. So some of the stuff that Laguna Rainbow did, we have a lot of our staff are actually local. And so because families weren't able to come in, some of the staff helped some of the elders that wish to participate, but go outside, do cornmeal and pray, and they were able to bring that in out here in, we weren't able to allow outside food in at the time. And as a center, even before, after, during COVID, we still do traditional meals. And so we were able to still provide those meals to the elders so they could enjoy like blue corn enchiladas, Haine, which is a blue corn, it's kind of like a blue corn meal, kind of like a malto meal is the best way to explain it. If you've ever been to New Mexico, there's a lot of red or green chili. And so we incorporated that and we still continue to into our food. And so there's other cultural meals that some of our cooks, provided their, home, they would cook at home. They're used to cooking larger amounts for feast days and stuff. And so some of them do bring in their own recipes. We had we serve, of course, beans, some fry bread and stuff. And so we kept with that, but I know some of the residents sure did miss because everybody kind of has their own variation, but they were happy with some of the food and some of that little extra kind of love that the staff did provide, because they did understand that they were basically, their families, and that's just how we are out there in general. But that bond was even stronger during that time, because sometimes even our own staff members couldn't go home to their families. They were quarantined or staying in hotels or try provided some RVs, because if they were even exposed, they weren't allowed to go home basically to expose the rest of the household. And so there was even isolation with our own staff. And so, staff and residents kind of leaned on each other during those times. And so if anybody else wants to share any stories.
This is Tiffany. I guess we just, try to, as COVID went by and everybody was getting vaccinated, we tried to keep, get back to normal as much as possible. We had the church on Sunday. We did hallway bingos. And of course, activities was a big part of it. Even though they did their hallway activities, and they also had meal committee meetings talking about food. The residents, the food is very important to them, so they can get together now and do their meal committees meetings monthly, but they still try to keep doing that in the hallways when they were isolated to their rooms. We were able to take them out last summer fishing. So we found a fishing area with a dock, and they really enjoyed themselves. We was able to take them in our vehicles or in our buses and take them out fishing. We have a counselor that comes in and visits with the residents. We do our activities, still had gardening, so they're able to do gardening outside in the back. A lot of that really helps them out.
So this slide is we want to talk about potential solutions for how this has affected each of our homes here. And some of them are like the staff buy-in, staff training, the consistency and follow through, educating new staff, the power struggles, and empowering the elders. So for some of Morningstar Care Center's staff buy-in, and I feel like how I would take that is being able to unite and be all the decisions that were made because of COVID, we have to unite somewhere, because no matter what, the home still has to operate 24/7 with cares around the clock, day, night. So having to be on board with staffing for the day, night shift, mid shift and then being able to help give that education for the staff or care partner to know that they have the confidence to carry that through. So ensuring that the elder resident is taken care of, but there's safety also there, because we have to remember that the elder resident is feeling that helplessness, that fear, you know, probably every time that a care partner staff walked into their room doing their job. And so making sure that that education was there for them to do that job 150%. And that during those times, I know it was stressful for both. And there was a lot of concerns, especially for my position as human resource manager, you know, of being able to need to hear, but then coming up as a team with solutions also, and making sure that when we left home, we felt good. We had to feel good about what we put in that day, because we always had to remind that we aren't the ones that have to, you know, that are to leave. This home is the elder resident's home. So for them to feel safe while they're here, we have to do our due diligence also when we leave and come back to take care. Because we have to remember we're the visitors in the home. This is their home. Staff training right out of the gun, you know, we have to make sure that, you know, we had everything marked off, you know, and with all the regulations and guidelines that was thrown at every home, every health facility. You know, the vaccinations was huge. You know, making sure that they knew about the different types of masks depending on the phase that we were in. Following up, being consistent, making sure we're having those conversations. We have this thing that we do here, and it's called a coffee huddle. So no matter what department it is, if an employee is struggling or if there's a situation that comes up, an issue, we get together as a team, 5 minutes over the radio, can we have a quick coffee huddle? And then we come together, we try to resolve it. And or we have to update, hey, this is new, this is what's happening. So I feel like a lot of that has helped us, especially with the communication part and the following up. And of course, through all of this, we've all had our power struggles. We've always had the opinions of others, which you have to respect. Everyone's gonna have an opinion about what is going on or what we just went through. And I think those are very powerful to be able to listen, because then when we have that listening, active listening engaged, it actually cultivates that respect. And in a way, it gives us patience to help each other, to understand where we're all coming from, especially during this time of COVID-19. I feel like it helped all of us grow, which we want to do for our elder residents, is to be able to thrive and keep them thriving, even though there was barriers put up. And that's where that empowering the elders back again, of making sure that they have that trust, they have that confidence to step out of the building again, being able to not wear a mask. That's, I feel like we have to empower there, not only the elder residents, but I feel like care partners as well. That's huge, because it all unites and it all works. And I feel like we're still learning, we're still doing this. So it's not like we have all the answers, but it's a positive direction to try to get back to some normalcy within the homes. And so every day, we're always learning, and that's a good thing. And thank you. I'm gonna hand it off.
This is Brandy. We part of the staff, we did the huddles like Ina was saying with all of our staff to make sure it was a consistency of the education with them. Anytime there was something new that came along, we were constantly learning along with the staff. But as long as our communication and everybody knew what was going on, it helped. We also were very truthful with our residents, telling them what was going on and how we had to do things, that it wasn't something that we're the ones that made up. It was something that those were guidelines that we had to follow regardless, and that we were just trying to keep them safe. And most of our residents were pretty understanding with that. With the power struggles, we tried to give residents as much power as we possibly could. With the resident council, we have our residents years and years ago wanted a men's wing and a women's wing. They just felt more comfortable with it. So we had a resident council on the men's side, and then we had a resident council on the women's side. So they were able to continue to tell us what, if we needed to improve on anything, or if they felt like they wanted changes, or what kind of activities that they would like Melissa was saying, the food, we did a lot more food, and we let them pick and choose a lot more of the food items to help with the comfort part. They also were able to continue to do bingo that way. And then we also did a lot of staff training in our orientation. So as soon as a employee would start, that was part of how we would make sure that they were up to date with all of the education that came along with COVID. And we continue to still do that with our employees now and our residents. We talk to them. We put that in part of our admission also, of the guidelines that we still have to follow when it comes to COVID. So that way, when they are a new admission or a new employee, they get the same information on both sides. And I'll pass it on to anybody else if they want to talk about anything.
Okay, are we ready to ask some questions, or does anyone have any questions? How can people from outside of care facilities support efforts to elevate elder voices? Do one of you want to answer that?
This is Joseph Ray. I would say that continuing to be a voice for elders, whether they're living in a nursing home or back in the community, when it goes to as far as advocating with your tribal leaders, with any of your state governments, that the fact of there are only 20 tribally run nursing homes for over 575 recognized tribes is really the type of help that our tribal elders need. Granted, not every tribal elder wants to live in a nursing home or has that need, but definitely we do have many elders who are in need of adult daycare, of respite care for their caregivers. So how Unite is working is advocating is on the state, local, and national level to be recognized by the Indian Health Service, which is usually our main point of contact, advocating for more funds to go into long-term care, long-term services and supports. That's what I would like to add. Advocating with your elected representatives on all levels to, again, provide more dollars into the Indian Health Service budget for that elder care. Advocating with your tribal leaders to create a system of care for their elders. Here at Laguna, in my former capacity as a board member, again, we're so very thankful to have the facility here at Laguna, 58-bed nursing home. But again, what about all the other tribal members that end up in facilities many, many miles away from their homes, away from their reservations? That's where people who aren't part of a long-term care facility can be very helpful.
Thank you, Joseph. And you answered half of the next questions. How many tribally owned long-term care facilities are there that are tribally owned and run in the nation? And do any of those have memory care units?
I believe some of the nursing homes representatives that are on the call today can answer that question.
I actually don't know how many. That's a good question. I just know that we do.
This is Brandy. In South Dakota, we have 3 Native American facilities, and I'm not sure, they just put up a new facility, and I'm not sure if that has a memory unit or not, but I know our facility and Cheyenne River does not have a memory facility.
Anyone else want to add maybe where you're at, or?
In New Mexico, there's 2 tribal nursing homes. Nationwide, I think there's actually closer to 23 now. And there's a handful of assisted livings. There's 1 assisted living in New Mexico as well. We don't have any memory care units here in New Mexico that specialize in Native American care, but as some of the panelists, they have some in their centers. And I've only heard of a few handful, which is interesting because there's a huge population of Native Americans with dementia or Alzheimer's. And so that's something that our board is looking at as we're trying to develop a plan for a new facility and stuff, and seeing if there's any way for us to address that possibly.
Thank you, Melissa, for that. We've had the opportunity to work with IA Squared and the last couple of webinars, and to really understand the impact of Alzheimer's dementia in Indian countries. So thank you for bringing that up. Here in Montana and Wyoming, there are 2 nursing, or at least in Montana, the Blackfeet tribe and Crow tribe have a long-term care facility that I'm aware of. And I believe there is one at Wind River as well. So that could be. All right, so in the question and answer box, we have Flandreau Santee Sioux Tribe Care Center in Flandreau, South Dakota is a new facility, and it does have a 12-bed memory care unit. So thank you, Jared, for putting that in. And then another question is, are tribal nursing homes available for elders that do not have Medicaid/Medicare?
This is Brandy from White River Healthcare Center. I think all of the tribal nursing homes are available that do not have Medicare and Medicaid, but it'd be private pay. And I think that's how all nursing homes are. So you either have to qualify for Medicaid or private pay in our facilities here in South Dakota.
Well, we're getting really close. We're at the end of our time, and I would really just like to thank everyone, Brandy, Melissa, Joseph, Tiffany, and Ina, for joining us. In closing, again, thank you for joining us, and that concludes our session.